Hey everybody! Today we're going to be going over 5 very fun scout builds in Deep Rock Galactic. These are some of my personal favorites. Just because they're fun doesn't necessarily mean they're good, but most of these are also fairly good. So let's hop right into this. For our first build, we're going to be using the M1000 rifle as our primary weapon, and we're going to be taking Hipster with it. And then for a secondary, we're going to be taking the crossbow with the Triforce volley. This build in particular is actually really strong. This is a really solid build overall, and it works on basically every type of mission. You have such a flexible weapon with Hipster. Hipster kind of works with everything, so whatever you want to take as a secondary. What Hipster does is let you spam fire the M1000. You get a much higher rate of fire, you get less recoil, you get tons of extra bullets, and the damage drop-off from it is not really that significant. You can build it also in tons of ways. You can build it for damage and still have it be pretty good at that. You can build it for even more ammo and spam firing. You can build it a hybrid build between the two, or just about anything that you want with Hipster. This is the way that I usually run Hipster. So extra ammo in tier 1. This is the spam fire build, I should say. Armor breaking in tier 2. That one's pretty important for Hipster. I would recommend that one. Larger magazine in tier 3. You can spam it easier if you have more bullets. Blow through rounds in tier 4, you can get extra value, and then faster reload in tier 5, but anything works in tier 5. Take whatever you'd like. You could also go with extra damage in tier 1. That's a great option too. And if you wanted more of a focus shot build, I would recommend taking the damage in tier 1 and tier 3. That works just fine. You're limited to 4 focus shots then, but they can still one-shot, body shot grunts, even on the highest difficulty. This one is going to be your go-to weapon. You're going to be using it for basically everything. Just spam it at whatever you see. It doesn't matter if it's big, it doesn't matter if it's small, it doesn't even matter if you're hitting it in the weak spot, just spam it at it. As long as you're just not hitting an oppressor in the armor, you'll do some damage. And you can get a lot of damage per second out of this, and a lot of damage just overall with it. It's super ammo efficient, and even if you're not being ammo efficient with it, it really doesn't matter that much. For the crossbow, like I said, we're going to be running Triforce volley, so every time we shoot out our bolts, we're going to be firing 3 bolts, which do slightly less damage than just the standard bolts do. However, it does fire out 3, so our burst damage is much higher. Reload speed's a little bit nerfed, but that's not a huge deal. The way that I like building Triforce volley is like this. This is for even more damage. This is just to kill big things. It's okay for killing crowds, but this is mainly just used for big things, and I use Hipster for everything else. This is the build that I use, not with the Fear on it, although Fear's not bad either. So in tier 1, I go with Electro Bolts. This is to slow down enemies. This is really good against Dreadnoughts. You put 2 of these into a Dreadnought, and it's moving incredibly slow. It's really easy to get around it, and then just keep hitting it with the Triforce. And I take Magnetic Shafts in tier 5 for the same reason. You can also stack an IFG on top of this. The IFG also works with this. Any sort of electric status works with this. So also if you have Bosco, you can do really high damage to single targets. Extra ammo in tier 2, that's just a little bit more value. You can take whatever you want in tier 2 though. They're all great options. Faster reloads in tier 3 to kind of make up for our slow reload. And then extra mobility in tier 4. There's no reason to take the radio transmitter, because with both these bolts, we can't get them back anyway, so that would just be a dead skill, and the extra movement speed is pretty nice. This one is a super fun build, super flexible build, and will work on basically any type of mission, because Hipster will work on any type of mission, and then we just have Triforce for extra high damage. If you wanted an alternative to this, and you still wanted it to be kind of the same themed, I would say just take something like either embedded detonators with the Zukovs, if you also want a lot of damage per second, or take jumbo shells with the boomstick. That's another great option if you just want more damage on your secondary. Moving on to our second loadout, we're going to be using the Drak Carbine as our primary weapon, and we're going to be taking this with Aggressive Venting, a super fun overclock, and has gotten even better since the Season 2 update, because now it's a clean overclock with no downsides whatsoever. This lets you overheat your gun, dealing fire damage to everything around you. And I really love this one. It's super ammo efficient. It's really good for crowds. Not so good on like Dreadnought missions, but that's okay. Our secondary will kind of make up for that. For a secondary, we're going to be running the Zukovs with gas recycling, which is a high damage overclock for the Zukovs, but comes with its downsides of not being able to move quick. The way that I build aggressive venting is like this. With this build, it lets you overheat the gun really easily, and it lets you have 2 status effects. You can have electricity, and you can have fire on your weapons. This is really useful because we're going to be building electricity bonus damage on our Zukovs. So the idea of this is if we're not using the IFG, which I usually use the IFG with this particular combo too, you can still electrocute enemies with the Drak and then switch over to the Zukovs to deal high damage to them. If you're just fighting regular crowds and lots of regular grunts, maybe Praetorians thrown in, aggressive venting is going to be able to clear them up really quickly. Fight this at close to medium range, and then just keep overheating your weapon. You can move around really quick, and every time you overheat it, you're going to fear everything around you anyway, so even big things like Praetorians are going to run away from you. We're going with extra rate of fire in tier 1, so we can overheat our gun faster. We're going with extra ammo in tier 2. We don't really need damage with this, because a lot of our damage is going to be coming from the aggressive venting itself, so damage is not as useful, but it's still not a bad option if you want to take that. Hot feet in tier 3 because we are going to be overheating this. We might as well be moving fast while we do that. Our other two options really aren't that great anyway for this particular build. Electricity in tier 4, again, this is so that we can trigger the electricity, and then manual heat dump in tier 5, that's so that we can actually just manually overheat this and get even more value out of the weapon. It makes it so it takes you a very long time to run out of ammo if you're constantly fighting hordes and you're just constantly overheating this. Even against single targets, it still will rack up more momentum. Now, what gas recycling does is it gives you more damage. I think it's actually been buffed. I was thinking before it was 5 damage, but it's now up to 6. I could be wrong about that. I could be remembering that wrong. There are some downsides to this, and one of them is not worded incredibly well. I've talked about this before, and that is that you lose out on weak spot damage. That's not entirely true. You lose out on the bonus damage that the Zhukovs already have base. So the Zhukovs have an additional 15% more damage when you're hitting a weak spot. That goes away, but still if you're hitting a weak spot, you're usually still doing double or triple the damage that you normally would. It depends on the enemy type. Something like a detonator takes triple damage, regular grunts take double damage. The way that I like to build this is going with extra ammo in tier 1, but extra damage is good too. Either one, pick whichever you like. If you want more damage per second, go with extra damage. If you want more sustained fire, go with extra ammo. Faster reloads in tier 2, but you can take anything that you want in tier 2. They're all great options. Increased accuracy in tier 3. I would recommend this one because otherwise it becomes a little bit difficult to hit anything outside of like very close to medium-ish range, and even medium range is a little bit pushing it without this. At least with this, you can still hit at medium range. Still not great at long range, so the Zhukovs are really never going to be great at long range. Extra ammo in tier 4, but all of them are good in tier 4. Well, besides the weak spot damage, because that one also gets taken away, so don't take that one. But if you want blow-through rounds, or if you want extra ammo, both of those are pretty good options. And then extra damage when things are electrified in tier 5. This is kind of an extreme run and gun build, and it's kind of cool that you can stack the abilities back and forth, because we do have hot feet with the Drac, so it's really not that hard to spray out the Drac, overheat it, switch to the Zhukov, spray something, and still be moving at about normal speed. You have plenty of ways of getting out of bad situations, so it doesn't really put you in that many. Then if you just constantly keep moving with this build, you're going to have a lot of success with it. Moving from the Drac to the GK2 for our third build, we are going to be running full rate of fire GK2. So this is taking overclocked feeding mechanism as its overclock, and then we're going to be pairing it with the secondary of Vodka Points on the crossbow, which is also incredibly fun. So with the full rate of fire GK2, I build it like this. This isn't necessarily the strongest way to build this overclock, but it is probably the most fun because the 14 rate of fire that you get out of it is kind of crazy. It actually doubles the overall rate of fire of the GK2. So we're going with extra rate of fire in tier 1 and in tier 4. Tier 1, it's actually a pretty good option. You could go with either in tier 1 if you want to build this for a more serious build, because this overclock is legitimately really good. In tier 4, this one is a lot less necessary. I think the armor breaking and the weak spot damage is both better than an increase in rate of fire. You don't need that much more rate of fire. It's just that this way is extremely fun to use. Extra ammo in tier 2 because you will run through bullets with this really fast. Extra mag size in tier 3. You could go with recoil reduction or even damage in this tier. Again, they're all pretty good options. And then I like going with the battle frenzy in tier 5 so that we can move fast with this. That one's not entirely necessary either. You could go with stun or even the increased accuracy. And this is pretty much just a souped up GK2. It sprays bullets out so fast. It does a lot of damage per second, surprisingly. It can be a little bit hard to control. However, it's not the most difficult because the recoil kind of evens out after the first couple rounds. So you fire out the first burst of bullets and generally the GK2 wants to climb. Luckily, it just seems to climb vertically and then it kind of evens out. So then you can kind of just go and hold this down onto a particular enemy. It's not too hard to hold onto weak spots of big enemies like Praetorians, Oppressors, Wardens, anything like that. And I mean, as Scout, it's pretty easy to get close to those enemies and close to those enemies' weak spots to just spray them down really fast. And that's pretty much what you're going to be doing with the GK2. Be sure to go for Nitra early on because you can run through ammo with this extremely fast. And then we're pairing this with Vodka Points, which is probably one of my new favorite overclocks and probably one of my most favorite overclocks in the game. This one essentially gives you magic bullets with kind of an extra step. If you're not familiar with magic bullets, it's whenever you shoot near an enemy, then the bullet will bounce into another nearby enemy. Or at least it will try to whenever there are enemies nearby. Vodka Points is basically the same thing, but it will bounce into 2 enemies and you have to hit the first enemy. So you get to hit up to 3 enemies with just 1 bolt. However, you lose out on reload speed and you lose out on damage. The damage is kind of rough. However, you still hit enough damage to one-shot grunts with this. And since you can hit 3, it's kind of like having blow-through rounds with the crossbow, at least if you're just using it on grunts. And I think it still has enough damage if you hit a slasher in the head with the first shot. I think ricochets also count, but they are very, very unlikely to actually hit a slasher in the head. The way that I like to build it is like this. So we're going with pheromone bolts in tier 1. You can pick whichever you want in the bolts. All of them are really good for this. If If you want more damage, you can go with electric bolts or with the chemical bolts. I think that they're all pretty good options here. I just like going with the pheromone bolts. Going to the extra damage in tier 2, you need this to one-shot grunts normally. Otherwise, it just doesn't work out, and I find that it's a little bit less consistent, a little bit less fun to use if I don't have the damage on it. Faster reloads in tier 3 makes up for our reduced reload speed. Then faster movement in tier 4. This one's kind of weird because it can trigger after you hit something. So if you hit something like a Praetorian, and then you take off running, you might get a speed boost because those bolts might bounce into something else and then bounce into like a grunt or a swarmer, jellyfish, whatever it is, and then get you the speed up. And then we have the potent special bolts in tier 5. This just pairs well with the pheromone bolts, so the pheromone bolts last longer. If you don't want that, you could pick one of the other ones too. Again, they're all pretty great options. And this is just a super fun build. You have ricocheting arrows, and you have a super fast rate of fire assault rifle. You can move around the map really, really quick with this. And it is super fun. If you like being a hyperactive scout, this might be the build for you. Then for our 4th build, we have the Flying Scout build. This one kind of had to make it on the fun scout build list. So this is going with Hover Clock as our primary on the M1000 Classic. And then we have Special Powder on the Boomstick as our secondary so that we can fly even more. So what Hover Clock does is once you use a focus shot with the M1000, you don't actually have to use the focus shot, but just once you go into the focus mode of the M1000, you start to float, at least if your feet are off the ground. So you can mitigate fall damage with this, which is pretty awesome. And it's just a super fun overclock to be using in the first place because it gives you extra things that you can do with your weapons. The way that I like to build it is like this. This is kind of my standard M1000 Classic build. So going with extra ammo in tier 1, armor breaking in tier 2. This lets us one-shot, body shot any of the grunts as long as we use focus shots. Larger mag size in tier 3, blow through rounds in tier 4, and then stun in tier 5. Again, pretty much all of these you could switch around. This is a clean overclock. It doesn't come with any downsides. It's just a bonus of that you get to kind of hover around. So that's pretty cool. With Special Powder, I'm usually running it like this. However, you can switch it around quite a bit because, again, it's a clean overclock. I would recommend taking the extra ammo in tier 1 and 3 like I do here because that way you can use it a bit more if you need to fly around with it. If you don't find that you're using it too often for that purpose, though, and just kind of using it to retreat every once in a while, you could go with the larger pellets in tier 3. That's a great option, too. Tier 2, you could go with either of these, faster reloads or faster rate of fire. Faster rate of fire does affect reload speed, too, and if you're spamming this one after another, it is generally a better option to go with the faster rate of fire. The extra reload speed I like, though, because there are plenty of times where I forget to reload my boomstick and I'm not running Born Ready. It comes in clutch for me just to save myself. If you don't find yourself running into those situations, though, then either one of these is great. Blow through rounds in tier 4 just gets you the most value out of anything here with the shotgun, and then white phosphorus rounds in tier 5. Fire is really nice, although Fear the Boomstick is also pretty decent with this one. And again, if you like the idea of Born Ready, but you're not actually taking it, you could go with the Born Ready tier 5 as well. If you like both of them and you really liked your grappling hook, you're probably really going to love both of these because they are two of the funnest overclocks in the game. And then for our last build, we're running an Elemental Scout build, although there's plenty of ways that you could run an Elemental Scout build. There's actually a lot of ways you could build an Elemental Scout build, so this isn't the only way you could do it. So for this, as a primary weapon, we're taking the electric focus shots with the M1000, and then for a secondary, we're going to be taking the cryo minelets for the Zukovs. Now again, you could switch this out for something different. You could switch this out for the Cryobolt crossbow or the Firebolt crossbow. Both of them are really good. And you could also switch out the primary for either the electric reload GK2 or just the Drac built with electricity on it, and then take something like thermal exhaust for that extra elements so that you have fire on it too. Or even our aggressive ending build that we talked about earlier to add fire to it. For the M1000 Classic, I'm running a build like this, so we're going with more ammo in tier 1. This is pretty important so that we can be using the focus shots a little bit more. Armor breaking in tier 2, but really you can pick whatever with this build. This build worked kind of weird. I would definitely recommend the blow through rounds in tier 4 though, because you can apply it to multiple enemies and that way you can get a little bit more value out of it. Larger magazine in tier 3 and then stun in tier 4. Again, we can have another status effect on top of this by adding the stun, so we'll be shooting something, electrocuting it, and likely stunning it so long as we hit it in the weak spot. Major downside to this one is that your focus shot damage is cut down, so focus shots will still kill things like grunts, but it takes time now. Your time to kill is a little bit slower, although it's not necessarily any more dangerous to have that because the slowdown from the electricity usually makes up for it. And it does feel kind of awkward against big enemies. I wouldn't really recommend taking this one on like a Dreadnought mission. It's not as good as some other builds that you could take. Then for our secondary, we are running the Cryo Minelets on the Zukovs. I usually build Cryo Minelets like this, so we're going with extra ammo so that we can have more Minelets. Faster reloads, although any of them are fine in tier 2, whichever one you want to take. Increased accuracy in tier 3, because damage is not as useful. Blow through rounds, this just helps so we can punch through an enemy and leave the Cryo Minelet below them. then it can go off and potentially freeze them or freeze enemies behind them. And then we're going with electricity damage and tier 5, but you could run, get in, get out too. This is just to potentially get a little bit more damage and to kind of go with more of our elemental scout build. And then of course you could always combine this with any of your grenades. IFG, cryo grenade, or the pheromone grenades all kind of work with this. All of them are pretty good. This build is definitely made for more kind of casual missions, shooting normal grunts, shooting groups of enemies. It's really good for that. Not really great on like elimination missions. It's not really great on rival presence because you don't have a lot of damage there either. So I would avoid it for either of those. It's also kind of rough if you end up getting something like an Omen Tower because these also aren't great against that. This is certainly more of a crowd control build and kind of more of a meme build that's just sort of meant to be fun, not really one of the best. Thanks for watching this video, and special thanks to the supporters of this channel. I really do appreciate your guys' support. It means the world to me. If you guys would like to see more of my Deep Rock Galactic content, be sure to click over here on this playlist right now. That'll take you to a full list of all sorts of shenanigans and builds. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye!